Welcome the anointed ones. You spoke up. And the second those words left your mouth, something in the atmosphere shifted so violently that even the people who thought they had you figured out suddenly went silent. Not the comfortable kind of silence. The kind that happens when someone realizes they miscalculated, underestimated, and completely misread the situation. That moment when you finally opened your mouth and said what needed to be said, you didn't just speak words. You activated a frequency that's been dormant, waiting for the exact right moment to detonate. And, chosen one, that detonation just rearranged everything around you. Here's what most people don't understand about silence. Strategic silence isn't weakness, it's preparation. You weren't quiet because you were afraid. You were quiet because you were observing, calculating, and waiting for the perfect moment when your words would carry maximum impact. Psychologists call this emotional regulation and impulse control, but what they don't tell you is that when someone with your level of awareness chooses to finally speak, it's not just communication, it's a complete energetic restructuring of every dynamic you're part of. The universe itself takes notes when a chosen one breaks their silence, because your voice doesn't just carry sound, it carries truth, authority, and a level of clarity that exposes everything hiding in the shadows. Think about it. How many times did people get comfortable in your silence? How many times did they assume your quietness meant agreement, submission, or ignorance? They built entire narratives around the idea that you'd never challenge them, never call them out, never defend yourself with the precision of someone who's been paying attention the whole time. They thought your silence was their safety net. What they didn't realize is that every second you stayed quiet, you were gathering evidence, connecting dots, and preparing a response so accurate it would leave no room for denial. And when you finally spoke, it wasn't emotional chaos. It was calculated truth, delivered with surgical precision. The moment you spoke up, you didn't just change the conversation. You changed the entire trajectory of your life. Doors that were closed suddenly had no choice but to open. People who dismissed you suddenly couldn't ignore you. Opportunities that seemed impossible suddenly became accessible. Because your voice carries a vibration that the universe has been waiting to hear. It's not about volume. It's not about aggression. It's about alignment. When a chosen one speaks from a place of truth and authority, reality itself has to adjust. And that's exactly what happened. So buckle up, because today we're breaking down exactly why speaking up was the most powerful move you've ever made, and how that one decision just altered everything. Number 1. Your silence was never weakness, it was strategy. Let's address the elephant in the room. For months, maybe even years, you watched, you listened. You absorbed every lie, every manipulation, every subtle disrespect, and you said nothing. People around you probably wondered why you didn't react. Some even assumed you were naive, oblivious, or too scared to stand up for yourself. But here's the truth they completely missed. Your silence was the most sophisticated form of intelligence gathering ever deployed. While they were talking, plotting, and assuming they had control, you were building a case so airtight that when you finally presented it, there would be no escape route, no excuses, and absolutely no way to twist the narrative. You understood something most people never grasp. Speaking too early gives your opponent time to adjust their strategy, craft better lies, and rally support. But staying silent while fully aware means you control the timeline. You decide when the truth gets revealed. You choose the moment of maximum impact. And that's exactly what you did. Every conversation you had, every interaction you endured, every fake smile you witnessed, it all became data. You weren't just surviving those moments, you were documenting them, filing them away in a mental archive that would later become irrefutable evidence. Your brain was running a background program the entire time, connecting patterns, identifying contradictions, and mapping out exactly how everything would unfold once you decided to speak. People mistake silence for compliance, but in your case, silence was surveillance. You were the undercover agent in your own life, watching how people behaved when they thought you weren't paying attention, observing how they treated you when they believed you'd never call them out, and the intelligence you gathered during that time became your greatest asset. Because when someone shows you who they are repeatedly and you have a photographic memory of every instance, speaking up isn't just about expressing yourself. It's about presenting documented truth that can't be argued with, dismissed, or reframed. Your silence built the foundation for a revelation they weren't ready for. The strategic brilliance of your approach is that you never showed your hand too early. You never revealed how much you noticed, how deeply you understood, or how extensively you'd been preparing. They genuinely believed they were getting away with it. They thought you were too kind, too trusting, or too focused on other things to recognize what was happening right in front of you. That false sense of security made them careless. They stopped covering their tracks. They got sloppy. They said things they shouldn't have said and did things they thought you'd never connect. But you connected everything. And when you finally spoke, the precision of your words proved that you'd been wide awake the entire time, watching every move they made with crystal clear awareness. Number 2, the moment you spoke, reality had no choice but to shift. There's a specific type of energy that gets released when a chosen one who's been silently observing for an extended period finally decides to speak. It's not just words entering the atmosphere. It's a frequency so potent that it literally reorganizes the energy in the room, in the relationship, in the entire situation. Scientists talk about how sound waves can shatter glass when they hit the right frequency. Your words did something similar, except what shattered wasn't physical. It was illusions, lies, false narratives, and carefully constructed facades that people had been hiding behind. The second you opened your mouth and spoke your truth, those structures couldn't hold any more. They collapsed under the weight of reality you introduced. What makes this even more powerful is that you didn't speak from emotion. You spoke from clarity. There's a massive difference between reactive speech and authoritative speech. Reactive speech comes from being triggered, feeling defensive, or wanting to hurt someone back. That kind of speech is messy, easily dismissed, and often regrettable. But authoritative speech comes from a place of absolute certainty. It's calm, precise, and backed by irrefutable truth. When you spoke, people could hear the difference. They could feel that you weren't guessing, assuming, or exaggerating. You were stating facts they couldn't deny, because you had receipts for every single claim you made. That level of preparation made your words impossible to ignore or refute. The shift that occurred wasn't just in how people saw you, it was in how reality itself responded to your voice. Opportunities that had been blocked suddenly opened up. Conversations that needed to happen suddenly started. People who had been avoiding accountability suddenly had no choice but to face it. Because when a chosen one speaks from alignment, the universe backs them up. It's like you filed an official complaint with reality itself, and reality said, "You know what? You're absolutely right. Let me handle this." From that moment forward, everything started moving in your favor, not because of luck, but because your voice activated a level of authority that demanded respect from both people and circumstances. Think about how many times you've seen people speak up and nothing changed. They yelled, they cried, they pleaded, but the situation stayed the same. That's because their words weren't coming from the right place. They were speaking from desperation, from hoping someone would finally hear them, from needing external validation. But you spoke from power. You spoke knowing that whether people acknowledged it or not, you were stating absolute truth. And truth has its own energy. It doesn't need agreement to be valid. It doesn't require applause to be real. Your words carried that kind of truth. And the moment they entered the world, everything that was out of alignment with that truth had to either correct itself or get exposed and removed. Number 3, they realized you'd been watching them the whole time. The look on their faces when you spoke, let's talk about that for a second. Because the moment you started laying out exactly what you'd observed, exactly what you'd noticed, exactly what they thought they'd gotten away with, their expressions went through a very specific sequence. First, confusion. Wait, they noticed that. Then, shock. How much do they actually know? Then, panic. Oh no, they've been paying attention to everything. And finally, defeat. There's no way out of this. That progression happened in real time, and you watched it unfold with perfect clarity because you were completely calm while their entire world was crumbling. Here's what that moment revealed to them. You were never the naive, trusting person they convinced themselves you were. You were always aware, always observing, always connecting the dots. But you chose not to reveal your awareness until the timing was perfect. That realization hit them harder than any accusation could, because it meant that every conversation they had with you, where they thought they were being clever, you were actually 3 steps ahead, taking mental notes and cataloging every inconsistency. Every time they lied to your face and thought you believed them, you were actually filing that lie away in a growing collection of evidence. Every time they manipulated a situation and assumed you didn't see through it, you were watching the manipulation unfold in high definition, understanding exactly what they were doing and why. The power dynamic completely flipped in that moment. They went from feeling like they had control over the narrative to realizing they'd never had control at all. You'd been running the show the entire time. You'd been the director, the producer, and the editor of your own story, and you were just waiting for the right moment to reveal the final cut. When that moment came and you presented everything you documented, their only option was to face the truth they'd been avoiding. There was no spinning it, no reframing it, no convincing you that you misunderstood. You had facts, dates, details, and a level of accuracy that only comes from someone who's been deliberately paying attention while pretending not to. What made this even more devastating for them is that they built their entire strategy around the assumption that you weren't paying attention. They'd gotten comfortable. They'd stopped being careful. They'd said things and done things they never would have if they knew you were documenting everything. But you were. And the moment you revealed just how much you'd seen, they understood that every move they made had been observed, analyzed, and recorded. The silent observer they'd underestimated had actually been the most dangerous person in the room the entire time. Because while they were focused on performing and deceiving, you were focused on understanding and preparing. And preparation always beats performance when the truth finally comes to light. Number 4, your voice didn't just speak, it commanded. There's speaking, and then there's commanding. Most people speak hoping to be heard, wishing someone will listen, needing validation that their perspective matters. But when you spoke, there was no hoping or wishing involved. Your voice carried a frequency that demanded attention. Not in a loud or aggressive way, in a way that made people stop whatever they were doing and actually listen, because they could feel the weight of truth in your words. It's the same way people instinctively listen when someone who rarely speaks finally has something to say. Except in your case, it wasn't just that you rarely spoke. It's that when you did speak, you spoke with a level of authority that couldn't be dismissed. That authority didn't come from arrogance or ego. It came from absolute certainty. You knew what you knew. You'd done the work of observing, processing, and understanding. You'd connected every dot. You'd seen every pattern. And when you finally articulated all of that, your words didn't sound like opinions or complaints. They sounded like documented facts, being presented by someone who'd done the research. That's a completely different energy than reactive speech or emotional outbursts. What you delivered was a thesis backed by evidence. And the people listening could feel the difference. They couldn't argue with it, couldn't diminish it, couldn't pretend it wasn't valid. All they could do was face it. The command in your voice also came from the fact that you weren't asking for permission to speak your truth. You weren't requesting that people hear you out or hoping they'd understand. You were stating reality, and reality doesn't need approval. When you speak from that place, people can feel that you're not emotionally invested in whether they agree or not. You're simply presenting what is. That detachment from their validation is what makes your voice so powerful. They can't manipulate someone who isn't seeking their approval. They can't guilt-trip someone who isn't asking for their understanding. All they can do is deal with the truth you've laid out, whether they like it or not. Think about how different that is from the countless times people speak up and immediately start backtracking, softening their words, or apologizing for having an opinion. That's what happens when someone speaks without authority, when they're still unsure if they have the right to say what they're saying. But you didn't do any of that. You spoke, you meant every word, and you didn't dilute your message to make anyone comfortable. That's the kind of speech that changes outcomes. That's the kind of voice that shifts power, because when someone hears you speak with that level of command, they instinctively know that you're not someone who can be talked out of what you know, manipulated into silence, or convinced that you're wrong. You've already done the work. You've already arrived at your conclusion. And now you're just informing them of reality. Number 5, the people who underestimated you suddenly saw you differently. Before you spoke, certain people had a very specific image of you in their minds. Maybe they saw you as soft, accommodating, someone who'd always bend to keep the peace. Maybe they saw you as someone they could push around, someone who wouldn't stand up for themselves. Maybe they just saw you as someone who didn't have the backbone to confront uncomfortable truths. Whatever their perception was, it was based on the version of you that chose silence. And they mistook that silence for weakness. But the moment you spoke, that entire perception exploded. Suddenly they were face to face with someone they didn't recognize, someone sharp, aware, articulate, and completely unshakable. The cognitive dissonance they experienced in that moment was intense, because their brain had to reconcile two completely different versions of you. The quiet person they thought they knew and the powerful speaker who just dismantled their entire narrative with precision. That reconciliation process is painful. It forces people to admit they were wrong about you. Not just slightly wrong. Fundamentally wrong. They didn't know you at all. They knew a version of you that was strategically playing it small, observing from the sidelines, waiting for the right moment. And now that the real you had emerged, they had to confront the reality that they'd been dealing with someone far more intelligent, far more aware, and far more capable than they ever imagined. This shift in perception doesn't just affect how they see you, it affects how they behave around you going forward. Because once someone realizes they've underestimated you to this degree, they become more cautious. They stop assuming they can get away with things. They start second-guessing their own moves, because they know now that you're watching, you're processing, and you will speak up when necessary. That wariness is actually a form of respect, even if they don't want to give it to you. They have to. Their survival instinct demands it. Because you've proven that you're not someone who can be played, manipulated, or taken for granted. You're someone who sees everything, remembers everything, and when the time is right, will call everything out with devastating accuracy. The beauty of this transformation is that you didn't have to change who you are. You just revealed who you'd always been. The strength, the awareness, the intelligence. It was always there. You simply chose when to display it. And that choice made all the difference. Because now people know that the quiet person they thought they could overlook is actually the most dangerous person in the room. Not dangerous in a violent way. Dangerous in the way that truth is dangerous to lies. Dangerous in the way that awareness is dangerous to manipulation. Dangerous in the way that someone who's been silently gathering evidence is dangerous to someone who thought they'd gotten away with something. From this point forward, you'll never be underestimated again. Number 6, speaking up activated your next level of authority. What you might not have realized in the moment is that speaking up wasn't just about that specific situation or those specific people. It was an energetic declaration to the universe that you're ready to operate at a higher level of authority in every area of your life. Because the act of speaking truth when it's difficult, when it's uncomfortable, when you know there will be consequences, that act is a rite of passage. It's how you graduate from being someone who observes to being someone who shapes reality with their words. And once you cross that threshold, you can't go back. Your voice has been activated at a frequency it wasn't operating at before, and that new frequency affects everything you do going forward. Think about leaders, influencers, people who command rooms. They all had a moment where they decided to speak when it would have been easier to stay silent. That decision to use their voice despite the risk is what unlocked their ability to influence and lead. You just had your version of that moment, and the ripple effects of that decision are going to extend far beyond the immediate situation. You'll notice that your words carry more weight now. When you speak, people listen differently. They take you more seriously. They respect your perspective in ways they didn't before, not because you've changed, but because you've revealed a level of strength and clarity that commands respect whether people want to give it or not. This new authority also means you'll attract different opportunities. People who need someone with your level of awareness and willingness to speak truth will find their way to you. Situations where your voice is needed will present themselves, because the universe doesn't waste activated potential. Once you've proven you're willing to use your voice powerfully, you'll be placed in positions where that voice is essential. It's like you've leveled up in a game, and now you have access to challenges and rewards that weren't available before. The old version of you, the silent observer, was playing on level 1. The version of you that spoke up just unlocked level 10. And everything from this point forward is going to reflect that upgrade. The internal shift is just as significant as the external one, because now that you know you can speak truth in the face of opposition, you know you can do anything that requires courage. Speaking up when it's hard is one of the most difficult things a human can do. We're social creatures. We're wired to avoid conflict, to maintain harmony, to not rock the boat. Going against that wiring requires tremendous inner strength, and you just proved to yourself that you have that strength. That knowledge changes everything. You'll walk into future situations with a different level of confidence, not arrogance, but a quiet certainty that if something needs to be said, you're capable of saying it. And that capability makes you powerful in ways most people never experience. Number 7. You stopped waiting for permission to exist fully. For too long, parts of you were on standby, waiting for the right moment, the right permission, the right validation to fully show up. You dimmed your light, softened your edges, and held back your truth because you weren't sure if the world was ready for the full version of you. But when you spoke up, you stopped asking that question. You stopped waiting for external approval to be who you actually are. You just showed up, fully, unapologetically, and powerfully. And that shift from seeking permission to claiming authority is one of the most significant transformations a person can make. Because it means you're no longer operating based on what others think you should be. You're operating based on what you know you are. This is huge because most people spend their entire lives in that waiting room, hoping someone will give them permission to be great, to speak their mind, to take up space. They wait for a boss to recognize them, a partner to validate them, a parent to approve of them, society to accept them. And they stay in that limbo forever because external permission never feels sufficient. There's always another gatekeeper, another person whose approval they think they need. But you just walked past all of that. You gave yourself permission. You decided that your truth mattered regardless of who agreed with it. And that decision was the moment you stopped being a passenger in your own life and became the driver. The energy shift that comes with this is palpable. People can feel when someone has stopped seeking validation and started operating from internal authority. It's in the way you carry yourself, the way you speak, the way you make decisions. There's a groundedness that wasn't there before, a certainty that can't be shaken by external opinions. You're no longer looking for affirmation that you're on the right path. You know you're on the right path because you're the one who chose it based on your own clarity and wisdom. That self-directed confidence is magnetic. It attracts the right people and opportunities while naturally repelling the wrong ones. Because people who need you to be small can't handle this version of you. And that's perfect. They're supposed to fall away. What's interesting is how much capacity you gain when you stop asking permission. All that energy you were using to second-guess yourself, to worry about others' opinions, to play it safe so you wouldn't upset anyone. That energy is now available for creation, for growth, for actually living. You're not carrying the weight of everyone else's expectations anymore. You're not contorting yourself to fit into boxes that were never made for you. You're just being, and being takes so much less energy than performing or hiding. That freed up energy is part of why everything feels like it's moving faster now, why opportunities are flowing, why things are clicking into place. You removed the biggest obstacle to your own success, which was your own hesitation to show up fully. Now there's nothing in your way. Number 8. The right people finally saw you clearly. Here's something beautiful that happened when you spoke up. The people who were meant to support you, collaborate with you, and walk alongside you suddenly saw you clearly for the first time. Before, they might have sensed your potential, felt your energy, noticed your intelligence. But it was all a bit abstract, unclear, not fully formed. But when you spoke, you crystallized. You went from being interesting to being undeniable. And the people who have the spiritual eyes to see that, who have the awareness to recognize real when they see it, those people locked in. They started paying attention in a different way. They started taking you seriously in a different way. Because you just proved that you're not just potential. This is how the right collaborations form, the right partnerships emerge, the right support systems develop. People who need exactly what you offer were waiting to see if you'd step into your power. They can't work with potential. They can only work with people who are actively using their gifts. When you spoke up, you demonstrated that you're ready to use yours. You're not hiding anymore. You're not waiting anymore. You're in motion. And people who are also in motion recognize that immediately. They see someone who's done the inner work, who's gathered courage, who's willing to stand in truth. And they think, that's someone I want in my corner. That's someone I can build with. Your voice-activated alliances you didn't even know were waiting for you. The validation from these right people feels completely different than the validation you might have been seeking before. It's not desperate, it's not needy, it's recognitive. It's like when two people who speak the same language find each other in a foreign country. There's an instant understanding and instant connection because they recognize something familiar and valuable in each other. These people don't just tolerate you, they celebrate you. They don't just accept you, they champion you because they understand your value in ways surface-level people never could. And the wild part is, these connections often happen quickly once you make yourself visible. It's like the universe was holding them back until you were ready, and your voice was the signal that you're finally ready. You'll notice that conversations with these right people flow differently. There's less explaining, less justifying, less convincing. They just get it. They see what you see, they value what you value, and they're excited to move forward together in ways that honor everyone involved. This is what authentic community feels like. Not people who need you to be smaller so they feel bigger. Not people who question your every move, but people who trust your discernment, respect your voice, and genuinely want to see you win. These are the relationships that will carry you forward into your next chapter. And it all started because you were brave enough to speak. Number 9. You became proof that silence isn't the only option. One of the most powerful things you did by speaking up is you became living proof that silence isn't mandatory, that staying quiet in the face of wrongdoing, manipulation, or injustice isn't the only way to survive. So many people live their entire lives believing they have no choice but to accept whatever treatment they receive, to swallow their truth, to let things slide because rocking the boat is too dangerous. Now, you just demonstrated that speaking up is not only possible, it's powerful. And that demonstration matters more than you might realize, because somewhere, someone who's struggling with their own silence saw what you did and thought, if they can do it, maybe I can too. This is how cultural shifts happen, not through grand gestures or massive movements, but through individual acts of courage that inspire others to find their own courage. You might never know who you inspired. You might never hear from the person who saw your example and finally found the strength to speak their own truth. But that doesn't make the impact any less real. You created a ripple, and ripples move outward in ways the person who created them can't always track. Your one act of speaking up might have been the catalyst for dozens of other people to do the same. That's the nature of truth and courage. It's contagious. It spreads. It gives other people permission to access parts of themselves they'd locked away. What makes your example even more powerful is that you didn't speak from a place of anger or revenge. You spoke from clarity and necessity. You weren't trying to hurt anyone. You were trying to establish truth. That distinction matters because it shows people that speaking up doesn't have to be aggressive or destructive. It can be calm, composed, and still completely effective. In fact, it's more effective that way. Your example teaches others that they don't have to become someone they're not to use their voice. They don't have to yell, threaten, or attack. They can simply state what's true and let truth do its work. That's a lesson more people need to learn, and you just taught it through demonstration. The downstream effects of this can't be measured, but they're profound. Because every person you inspire to speak their truth potentially inspires others. It's exponential. Your courage multiplies. And while you're living your life, focused on your own journey, that multiplication is happening in the background, creating shifts and changes you'll never personally witness, but that are absolutely real. You became part of a larger movement toward authenticity, toward truth-telling, toward refusing to accept what's unacceptable, and that matters. Your voice joined a chorus of other voices that are changing the culture from one of complicit silence to one of empowered truth. You're not just changing your own life, you're contributing to changing how we all live. Number 10, opportunities started appearing that weren't there before. Here's where things get really interesting. After you spoke up, you probably noticed that opportunities that seemed impossible before suddenly became possible. Doors that were locked suddenly opened. Conversations that needed to happen suddenly started. Resources that were out of reach suddenly became available. This isn't coincidence. This is the direct result of you aligning your external reality with your internal truth. When you spoke, you sent a message to the universe that you're no longer willing to tolerate misalignment. You're no longer accepting less than what you deserve. And the universe, being responsive to that kind of clear declaration, started rearranging circumstances to match your new standard. Think about how energy works. When you're holding back your truth, you're essentially living in contradiction. Part of you knows something, but another part of you is pretending you don't know it. That internal conflict creates static, interference, blockage. It's like trying to run a computer program while another program is fighting against it in the background. Everything slows down. Nothing works quite right. But the moment you spoke your truth, you resolved that contradiction. You brought your external expression into alignment with your internal knowing. And when that alignment happens, suddenly, there's no more resistance. Energy can flow freely. And when energy flows freely, opportunities manifest faster, connections happen easier, and progress accelerates naturally. The specific opportunities that appear are often directly related to the truth you spoke. If you spoke up about being undervalued, suddenly people who value you show up. If you spoke up about boundaries being crossed, suddenly situations that respect your boundaries appear. If you spoke up about needing change, suddenly pathways to change open. It's like the universe heard your declaration and said, okay, you're ready for what you've been asking for, here it is. But you couldn't receive those things while you were still in silence, still in tolerance, still in acceptance of less than you deserved. Speaking up was the key that unlocked access to what was always meant for you but couldn't reach you while you were vibrating at the frequency of silence. What's even more fascinating is how these opportunities often come from unexpected sources, not the people or places you thought would support you, but from completely new directions. That's because your voice reached people and touched situations that your silence never could. You became visible to a whole new category of potential, people who are looking for exactly what you offer, exactly who you are, exactly what you're ready to become. And now that they can see you clearly, now that you've announced yourself through your truth, they're moving toward you with opportunities, collaborations, and possibilities you couldn't have predicted. This is what happens when you stop hiding and start showing up. Life starts showing up for you in return. Number 11. The people who needed your silence started to disappear. One of the most noticeable changes after you spoke up is how certain people just started fading out of your life. Not always dramatically, sometimes quietly, gradually, naturally, but they started disappearing nonetheless. And here's why. Those people needed your silence. They needed you not to speak up because your silence protected them from accountability. Your silence allowed them to continue their patterns without being called out. Your silence was convenient for them. But the moment you spoke, that convenience ended, and people who only stick around because you're convenient don't stick around once you start requiring them to be accountable, honest, or respectful. They simply leave. And that's perfect. This exit of the wrong people is actually a blessing disguised as a loss, because as long as those people were in your space, they were blocking access to the right people. They were taking up energy, time, and emotional resources that you need for your actual purpose, your real relationships, your genuine connections. But you were too kind, too loyal, or too hopeful to cut them off yourself. So the universe did it for you. Your truth was the clearing mechanism. It functioned like a filter separating people who resonate with authentic you from people who only resonated with compliant you. And the people who only liked compliant you couldn't handle authentic you. So they left. And you should be grateful. What's interesting is how quickly this separation happens once you speak. It's like your words activated a sorting system. People who are aligned with your truth moved closer, people who aren't aligned moved further away, and the middle ground disappeared. You're no longer dealing with lukewarm relationships, unclear dynamics, or people who are half in and half out. Everyone's position became clear. You know exactly who's with you and who's not. That clarity is invaluable, because now you can invest your energy wisely. You can pour into the people who deserve it. You can build with the people who are actually building with you. And you can let go of anyone who was only around because you weren't challenging them. The space created by these exits is sacred space. It's room for newness, for better, for aligned connections. Don't rush to fill it. Don't panic because your circle got smaller. Smaller is better when smaller means real. You don't need a crowd, you need a team. You don't need fans, you need family. The people who stayed and the people who are coming are the ones who will actually help you build the life you're meant to live. The ones who left were never part of that vision anyway. They were part of the old chapter, the one where you were still finding your voice. But you've found it now. And everyone who couldn't handle that can watch from a distance as you rise. Number 12. You started attracting situations that match your new energy. Energy attracts like energy. That's not just spiritual talk. That's basic physics. When you changed your frequency by speaking your truth, you started vibrating at a higher level of self-respect, self-awareness, and self-authority. And that new vibration attracts situations, people, and opportunities that match it. You can't keep attracting the same old problems when you're not the same old person. The version of you that spoke up is fundamentally different from the version that stayed silent. And reality is responding to that difference by presenting you with different options, different paths, different possibilities. You might notice that conflicts that used to drain you don't happen as often anymore. People who used to test your boundaries don't try as hard. Situations that used to trigger you don't have the same effect. That's because you're not feeding those patterns with your energy anymore. You're not available for that level of disrespect or dysfunction. Your energy is saying, I'm operating at a higher standard now, and anything that doesn't meet that standard isn't welcome. And the universe is honoring that statement by not sending you things you've outgrown. You graduated, you leveled up, and you don't have to keep taking the same test over and over once you've passed it. The situations you are attracting now are more aligned with who you're becoming. Maybe it's a job that actually values your input instead of just using your labor. Maybe it's relationships where you feel seen and appreciated instead of tolerated. Maybe it's opportunities to speak, to lead, to teach, to guide others who are where you used to be. Whatever form these new situations take, they have one thing in common. They require the version of you that speaks up, stands firm and knows your worth. They couldn't have come to silent you. They had to wait for awakened you. And now that you're awake, they're flooding in. This is also why life might feel like it's moving faster now, because you're in flow. When you're living in alignment with your truth, everything moves faster. Decisions are easier, choices are clearer, progress is quicker. You're not fighting against yourself anymore. You're not second-guessing every move. You're not carrying the weight of unexpressed truth. You're just living, creating, building, and evolving. And that natural flow state is where miracles happen, where unexpected blessings show up, where impossible becomes possible. You've entered a season of acceleration, and it all started the moment you decided to speak. Number 13, you realized your voice was always the missing piece. Looking back now, you can probably see what was missing all along. It wasn't more effort. It wasn't more patience. It wasn't more understanding or compassion or sacrifice. What was missing was your voice. The moment you used it, everything clicked into place. All the pieces that seemed disconnected suddenly formed a complete picture. And you realized that you'd been walking around with the answer the entire time. You just hadn't spoken it yet. Your voice was the key that unlocked everything. And the reason it took so long to use it isn't because you didn't know it was important. It's because you were waiting for the right moment. The moment when using it would have maximum impact. That moment came, and you seized it. You didn't hesitate once the timing was right. You didn't second guess. You didn't soften your message to make it more palatable. You just spoke. Clear, direct, true. And in speaking, you completed a circuit that had been open for too long. You closed the gap between who you are internally and who you present externally. You integrated the silent knower with the active speaker. And that integration is what transformed everything, because a person who knows but doesn't speak is powerful, but a person who knows and speaks is unstoppable. You just became unstoppable. The missing piece wasn't about anyone else. It was never about whether people would listen, agree, or validate you. The missing piece was about you giving yourself permission to be heard, to matter, to influence the narrative of your own life. You'd been waiting for external permission that was never going to come. And finally, you stopped waiting. You realized that the only permission you need is your own. And once you gave yourself that permission, everything else followed. Your voice activated your next level. Your truth opened your next door. Your words created your next opportunity. The missing piece was never missing. It was just silent. And now it's not. Think about how much power you've been sitting on this whole time. All that wisdom, all that awareness, all that truth. It was always there. You just hadn't released it yet. But now you have. And the world is responding. People are responding. Your life is responding. Everything is shifting in your favor because you finally used the most powerful tool you possess. Your authentic voice. The voice that doesn't perform or pretend. The voice that speaks from soul-deep knowing. The voice that changes atmospheres just by being honest. That voice was always the answer. You just had to be brave enough to use it. And chosen one, you were brave enough. You did what needed to be done. And everything is different now because of it. Number 14. Your standards rose and everything else had to match or move. Speaking up wasn't just about that one moment or that one situation. It was a declaration that raised your standards across the board. You essentially told the universe, I'm no longer accepting less than what I deserve. And that statement has implications for every area of your life. Your relationships, your work, your environment, your daily interactions. All of it has to meet your new standard, or it gets filtered out. You can't go back to tolerating what you wouldn't tolerate now. Your consciousness has expanded. Your awareness has deepened. Your self-respect has solidified. And everything in your life is being reorganized to reflect that upgrade. This reorganization might feel uncomfortable at first, because sometimes things have to fall apart before they can come together in a better way. Old relationships might end. Old situations might dissolve. Old patterns might break. But that's exactly what needs to happen. You're making room for new, for better, for aligned. The old stuff served you at your old level. But you're not at that level anymore. You've evolved. And your external circumstances need to evolve with you. Don't mourn what's falling away. Celebrate it. It's making space for what's coming. And what's coming is custom designed for this new version of you that knows its worth and isn't afraid to speak it. Your new standards also mean you'll start saying no more often. No to things that don't serve you. No to people who don't respect you. No to opportunities that require you to shrink. That might feel selfish or difficult if you're used to saying yes to keep peace. But here's the truth. Every no to what's wrong creates space for a yes to what's right. You can't be available for everything. You have to choose. And now that you've tasted what it feels like to honor yourself by speaking your truth, you're not going back to dishonoring yourself by accepting what you know isn't right. Your standards aren't negotiable anymore. They're the foundation of how you move through the world now. What's beautiful about this is how natural it becomes. At first, maintaining higher standards might feel like work. You might have to consciously remind yourself not to slip back into old patterns. But over time, it becomes your new normal. You won't even remember what it was like to accept less. The person who stayed silent, who tolerated disrespect, who dimmed their light, that person will feel like a character from someone else's story, as you'll have grown so far beyond that version of yourself that returning is impossible. You'll look back and barely recognize who you used to be. And that's exactly how transformation is supposed to work. You don't just improve, you fundamentally change. And speaking up was the catalyst for that irreversible change. Number 15. You became a force that can no longer be ignored. Here's the final truth. Before you spoke, you were powerful but hidden, aware but silent, capable but restrained. You had everything you needed to make an impact, except one thing, the willingness to be seen doing it. But when you spoke, you removed that final barrier. You stepped into full visibility. You became undeniable. And chosen one, a person with your level of awareness, intelligence, and truth, who is no longer hiding, is an unstoppable force. You cannot be ignored anymore. You cannot be dismissed anymore. You cannot be overlooked anymore, because you've proven you'll speak when something needs to be said, and that makes you essential. Forces that can be ignored don't change things. Forces that can't be ignored do. You just moved from the first category to the second. And that shift means you're going to have impact whether you're trying to or not. Your presence alone will start shifting dynamics. Your words will carry weight. Your opinions will matter. Your truth will influence outcomes. Not because you're forcing it, but because people recognize that you speak from a place of genuine knowing. You're not guessing. You're not performing. You're stating what you've observed, processed, and understood. And that kind of authenticity is so rare that it commands respect, even from people who don't want to give it. The force you've become isn't about power over others. It's about power within yourself that overflows naturally into every space you occupy. You don't have to try to be influential. Influence is the natural byproduct of being authentic and visible. You don't have to campaign to be heard. People will listen because what you say resonates as truth. You don't have to fight for respect. It's given automatically because you respect yourself enough to speak your truth, regardless of who agrees with it. This is leadership, not the kind that requires a title or position, the kind that happens organically when someone steps fully into who they are and refuses to pretend otherwise. Your journey from silence to voice has been profound. It required courage, wisdom, and perfect timing. You didn't speak too early. You didn't stay silent too long. You spoke at exactly the right moment, with exactly the right words, and the impact is still unfolding. Your life will never be the same. Your relationships will never be the same. Your trajectory will never be the same. Because you chose truth over comfort. You chose authenticity over acceptance. You chose your voice over your safety. And that choice made all the difference. You are no longer who you were. You are who you were always meant to become. And the world is responding to that truth by giving you exactly what someone at your level of courage and clarity deserves: access, opportunity, recognition, influence, and most importantly, freedom. The freedom that comes from no longer hiding, no longer holding back, no longer wondering what would happen if you just spoke. You know now. You changed everything. Everything you've been through, every moment you stayed silent, every observation you made, every pattern you noticed, it was all preparation for the moment you finally spoke. And when that moment came, you didn't waste it. You used your voice with precision, with power, with undeniable truth. And the ripples from that moment are still spreading outward, touching areas of your life you haven't even noticed yet. Speaking up wasn't just about resolving one situation. It was about announcing to yourself and the universe that you've arrived at a new level of existence, a level where your truth matters more than comfort, where your voice matters more than approval, where your authenticity matters more than acceptance. You did what most people spend their entire lives avoiding. You spoke truth when it was hard. You stood firm when it was uncomfortable. You refused to shrink when shrinking would have been easier. And that decision, that brave, powerful, necessary decision, changed everything. Your path is different now. Your energy is different now. Your future is different now. Because you're not carrying the weight of unexpressed truth anymore. Your future is different now. Because you're not carrying the weight of unexpressed truth anymore. You're free. And that freedom is going to take you places you couldn't have reached while you were still silent. The universe rewards courage, always. And chosen one, you just showed the kind of courage that moves mountains. If this message resonated with your spirit and spoke to your journey, don't keep it to yourself. Hit that subscribe button so you never miss another revelation designed specifically for chosen ones like you. Smash that like button to let us know this truth hit home. Drop a comment below sharing your experience of speaking up and how it changed your reality. Your story will inspire someone else to find their voice. And share this video with someone who needs to hear that their voice matters, that speaking up is worth it, that they're not alone in this journey. We're building a community of awakened chosen ones who refuse to stay silent in a world that needs their truth. Stay connected, stay powerful, stay vocal. Your voice is changing everything. And we're just getting started.